welcome to Adventures with ADHD, where I get the joy of shedding the spotlight on fabulous neurodivergent folks. So I've got Sarah. Hi, Sarah. Thanks for coming.
You're really welcome. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. I was going to kind of start again. I'm like, no, let's keep it real. I stuttered over my words, and there we
Do you know
are.
what? You know what? It's the wonderful thing because to have that realness in a podcast, because when you listen to all these podcasts and people are just like so pristine, it's just so when I launched my podcast, one of the instructions to my editor was leave it in. Leave it in. My brain goes wandering or black, leave it. So no, it's beautiful.
Yeah, and it is part of being authentic as well. So yeah, not covering up our lovely ADHD ways. So I know you, but let's find out a bit more about you and what you do.
Hey, my name is Sara Kedge. I am a DEI, Diversity, Equality and Inclusion Design Thinking Strategist. And that means that I help corporate leaders with complex people problems to make meaningful change. Generally, the stuff that goes beyond box tick. I'm looking over here because I've got my notes written down. So for those people that are watching us on YouTube or wherever, that's why I'm looking over here. It goes beyond box ticking so they can create inclusive and more healthy workplaces. I start with neurodivergence as a starting point, but fundamentally it's a bit like a Trojan horse, because what I actually go into corporates and talk about is critical thinking skills and helping people to develop the ability to think about the barriers in their systems, their processes, and how they do business for not just neurodivergent people, but LGBTQI plus people, people of color. So it's that stuff. But I go in as a Trojan horse.
Yeah.
The other thing I do is I work with neurodivergent folk as an entrepreneur coach and coping skills coach. So I work with people to understand their neurodivergence and hold experiments and play with things that help them to remove frictions from their lives. For example, I have a keyless life. I have no keys in my life, because when my old house, there was 1,000 keys around the village with neighbors hidden under rocks, because the number of times I lost keys or locked myself out of the house. So when I renovated the place I live in now, I was like, I'm not having that anymore. So I'm completely keyless. And that means I don't need to hide keys everywhere. I can get in and out of my house, my car. It's revolutionary for me.
Yeah, amazing. And gosh, what difference? So it's revolutionary. So what difference has it made to your day-to-day living then?
It's reduced anxiety, and for me, when I work with people on a one-to-one basis, it's often not the big things that make the difference, but the problems that most neurodivergent people struggle with is the tiny frictions, like where are my keys? Have I left them somewhere? Have I got the right keys? Did I lock the house up? And it's hundreds of these tiny little frictions. For example, everything in my house is on subscription that I can get on subscription, from the cat food to the toilet paper to the toothpaste. It's all on subscription, because I no longer, it was a friction because I'd go to do laundry and I'd run out of washing powder and I'd forgotten to go and pick new stuff up. Don't have that problem anymore because it just turns up. So it's
Amazing.
removing those tiny frictions to create space in your brain and in your world, which then has a knock-on effect of reducing the likelihood of me getting to burnout.
Brilliant. Yeah, and like you say, it's these seemingly small frictions, but actually the difference it makes is huge.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
really.
yeah, love that. Thank you. So tell us about your journey to understanding and knowing that you are neurodivergent.
I always knew that my brain wasn't quite right. Even as a small person, I kind of knew that my brain worked in a slightly different way to most of my peers, because when I was asked to do something at school, my brain would run away with itself and have brilliant ideas and different ways of thinking. How I communicated with my friends was different. I was quite an intense child. You know, I find this with most neurodivergent people, that I have no need for knowing where you're going on holiday, or whether, you know, your cat's. It's not that I don't care that your cat's well. I would just rather have a really deep conversation with you, and that's been throughout the whole of my life.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that that was a feature of neurodivergence. And it took until I was working as a strategic project manager, and I was asked to do some budgeting. And I was asked to, the task was simple. It was take some numbers from this spreadsheet here and move them to the spreadsheet there. And I worked on it, and numbers have always been difficult for me.
Mm.
When I passed it into my boss, he came back and said to me, I don't know what you were doing or how much you've been drinking, but the numbers you've given me bear no relationship to the numbers I gave you. And
Wow.
it was at that point that I was like, okay, so I need to now do something about this. And at that point, I was thinking, oh, it must be dyscalculia,
Yeah.
because it's a numbers thing. And it wasn't until I went back to university to do my MBA at Oxford Brookes University, that they gave us the online platform to get hold of all your module guides, all your library. And if anybody's used Moodle, I hate it as a platform. It's so difficult. And I was falling behind, not because I didn't want to do the work, because I couldn't find the things.
Mm.
So, long story short, I ended up going to student support services, and they suggested that I go and get diagnosed with or have an assessment for dyspraxia.
Right.
So I did, and went and got it, and lo and behold, I am profoundly dyspraxic. And I hold on to that word profoundly, because it was just like, I'm not just a little bit, I am
Yeah.
profoundly.
Wow.
So that was when it actually sort of shifted from actually dyscalculia to another
Mm.
identity. So that was then the first part of my journey to actually having labeling. And then I have a friend who is an amazing clinical psychologist, and we were sort of having a conversation about this a few years ago. And she sort of rubbed her chin and she said, you know what? I see the dyspraxic stuff. Actually, you are also really rather ADHD. And I was like,
Wow.
okay. So this is where the ADHD dyspraxia comes in.
Yeah.
But that was the start of my journey. I was 36 years old when I got my dyspraxic diagnosis. And it then took quite a long time. And I see this with a lot of people, both in my community, my clients, and other people around me, is that when you first have your awareness, or at least or your diagnosis, you almost go through it's a Kubler-Ross cycle of change, or grief
Mm.
cycle.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like go through these stages. So I went through the stages of denial, because when, you know, at the time I was working at a senior management position. How can I be profoundly disabled? Come on. So I
Yeah.
went through the denial, and then it's sort of like, then that starts to sink into my head. And it was actually, if I'd have known this earlier, I shoulda, coulda, woulda. And
Mm.
there was a lot of unpicking and a lot of stuff where I was thinking at different points in my journey, both in my academic and professional life, but also in my personal life. If I'd have understood my dyspraxic brain in the way that I do now, I would have approached personal and romantic relationships in a very different way.
Yeah.
So it's taken quite a long time to sort of get my head round and through to a
Yeah.
point where actually there are things I find really difficult, and there are things that I do really well.
Yeah.
And also to come to the point of recognizing, and this is one of the things that it grinds my gears about the neurodivergent community, and particularly stuff on TikTok and Instagram, is because when people talk about neurodivergence, they talk about all the things that are really hard. And
Mm.
it's always about hard and difficult, and it's almost in a fatalistic, this is the end of the road. And
Yeah.
actually, there are so many things you can do to improve the quality of your life, to shape some of your neuroplasticity, because some of the stuff is about learned behaviors.
Mm.
been given throughout the whole of our lives, and I coined the term requests to modify throughout the whole of our lives. And that's generally from people who love us and who care for us and who want us to be succeeding and part of the community.
Mm.
And as a child, that was often be my parents going, "Will you be quiet, Sarah? Will you pay attention, Sarah? Oh my goodness, you're so clumsy. What, you've dropped that again." And it's not was never intended to be harmful, but actually what it did was give me repeated messages that how I am naturally, how my brain works, is not okay.
Yeah.
So I then developed really complex coping mechanisms and strategies to hide those things, which in and of itself is exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's my journey. I will go off.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you for sharing so many kind of like insights in there that people and myself relate to. So thinking about dyspraxia, because that was the diagnosis that came first, how does that show up for you?
I am profoundly clumsy.
Right.
So for dyspraxia, the headline identifying trait of dyspraxia, because it's otherwise known as developmental coordination disorder, is that my brain doesn't tell my body where it is in relation to the built environment.
Right.
My brain just doesn't always work it out, or it's concentrating on 17 other things, so I forget that there's a cup on the side and I knock it
Mm.
over. So I am really clumsy. I'm generally covered in bruises or scratches because I've knocked into something or dropped
Mm.
something, and it's just a feature. For me, the other thing is around, and this comes back to the diagnosis thing. The Excel spreadsheet or the budgeting thing wasn't an issue necessarily with numbers, because when I had my assessment, Sylvia Moody, who did my assessment, she said it's about um, reading some information, putting it into your head. It's the
Mm.
processing thing that doesn't happen. So it then goes out of your head in a different
Yeah.
way. So it's the processing of information which can be, which sometimes means that I take longer to understand instructions, websites, web forms. It takes a long time and it can be incredibly frustrating for me to understand what is actually needed, or I just miss the point.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is also a bit for me which shows up in terms of emotional dysregulation. I feel things intensely
Mm.
for a very short period of time, and then it disperses. So when neurotypical people will generally have a sort of a gradual peak and flow into emotion and then gradual out, I'm like, oh, I'm gone.
Wow.
Um, there is also something for me, and because I do interact with different other human beings in a slightly different way to many other people, uh, I do get quite intense because I'm interested in people and I pay attention and I want to know things. So I'm curious, and I don't always understand the social nuances of actually it's not okay to ask that question, or now's the time to stop, Sarah.
Right.
Um, I also find, because I am quite auditory sensitive, I'm also got no sensitivity, so I find places where there are lots of people can be really difficult, particularly when there are lots of physically people, because actually the space thing isn't
Mm.
helpful. But also, if I was a hairdresser, my first profession was as a hairdresser and master barber.
Right.
So working in a multi-chair salon, I was able to listen to everybody else's conversations that were going on elsewhere and pay attention.
Wow.
So if you think about that, but in terms of there are hundreds of people in the room, my brain's binging all over the place trying to listen to what's going on. It just becomes too much. So
Yeah.
I sometimes I've got an award ceremony on Saturday, and I've already decided that for the rest of Saturday, nothing is happening. It's
Yeah.
complete sensory sort of comfort, and same with Sunday. It's just because I
Yeah.
know Saturday evening is going to be a lot of peopling, there's going to be a lot of noise, and I'm going to need time to decompress afterwards. So those are generally the things that stand out for me as how I experience my dyspraxia.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's so helpful. And yeah, that tip around, you've got the ceremony, the event. so then not having anything else that day and the day after. I mean, if everyone could do that and had the, you know, the ability to do that when events come up, I mean, it's a game changer, isn't it? And I do similar myself. If I've got if I'm delivering training, I now just take that whole day off, not take the day off, but, you know, don't book other stuff in. Otherwise, it's days to recover, you know, rather than one day. So, and thank you
That's
for
been
sharing.
And it's been one of those things that's been learned around because that request to modify, we all of us neurodivergent people do additional emotional, intellectual, and physical heavy lifting,
Mm,
and it has been a real learning journey for me to recognize that I have needs that should be met and can be met, and it's safe for me to meet those needs. So it didn't just happen that I would take, you know, I'd go, okay, I've got an event on Saturday, so therefore Saturday during the day and Sunday needs to be down. It's been a journey for me to recognize and to feel safe for me to take those things and to put those boundaries in place for me.
yeah, and safety, I think, is such a massive part of everything, isn't it? Feeling safe to recognize your needs, to honor them. But yeah, like the journey, it doesn't just happen overnight. This is a lifetime. Yeah. Wow. So, what helps you then with ADHD and dyspraxia? I mean, that's a big question, but you know, a few things that really have made a difference to your life.
And I've already mentioned being keyless. I've already mentioned putting everything on subscription. I've just
Mm.
noticed I have makeup on my palm. That's distracted me. Hello. Um, I used to think of myself as having OCD, because everything in my house has its place. And there is a place for everything, right down to all of my cutlery is facing in one direction, and it gets put away in a very particular. And I used to think that was an OCD thing. And the difference for me is because I never feared that something terrible would
Mm.
happen if things weren't in the right place. What I was actually doing is I was reducing my sensory overwhelm in the house, because if everything was in the place it should be, my eyes didn't have to look at and recognize and understand things that were going on. When I wanted to go and find, one of the things I do is, when I do my laundry, I have my duvet cover and I put the sheet inside I fold it up, fold it mostly, then there's a sheet, and then I put 3 pillowcases, wrap the duvet around them, and then I put the whole thing in a fourth pillowcase, because
Oh,
when I go and change my bed sheets, I can then take a pack out and I then don't have to go to a cupboard of doom looking for the pillowcases. So it's not an OCD, it's my brain is finding tips and tricks and ways to, as I say, today Sarah is doing something that tomorrow Sarah will thank her for.
love
So it's
that.
not OCD, it's just it's been habitually finding little things that reduce stress and overwhelm in myself.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a really good point to make, isn't it? If you were doing those things because of a fear of something bad happening, then you're into OCD. But this is something different that your brain has come up with and helped you reduce your struggles.
And actually, if you, because, and this was something that sort of a couple of years ago sort of landed in my head, is that I'm quite a sporty human. I don't enjoy team sports. I've played on rugby teams and I've tried team. It's not my jam. My enduring sports are, medium and long distance running, which I do on my own. I'm a pole dancer, and a rock climber. Uh, and throughout my life, I've done judo and I've done artistic roller skating. And the thing that's kind of common through all of those is if you think about rock climbing, you have to be really aware of where your body is in relation to the rock. So you can put your hand on a hold and then pull yourself up and then do it again.
Yeah.
So it's almost if my brain is helping me by attracting me to sports that means that I have to sort of rewire and sort of, my brain, and actually develop skills that aren't naturally there for me. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's amazing that the the body and brain will work together in that way. What was I
And
going to
it's one of
say?
those things, because one of the things that most people think is when they talk about their ADHD or their dyspraxia or their autistic brain is there's almost a combat going on, and it's almost like my brain doesn't help me, my brain is causing me problems. And
Mm,
actually, if we make a shift towards, we listen to what our brain's actually telling us, if we take a moment, a step to just actually ask us, what do I need right now? Our
yeah.
brain is wired to help us. It wants us to be happy, to be safe. There are two fundamentals with all humans. They want to feel safe and they want to feel loved. And
Mm,
your brain is wired for those things.
yeah.
And when we shift from our brain is diseased or dysfunctional and not helpful, and shift it to, okay, so what's my brain trying to help me with? And it's one of those things that when I work with ADHD clients, they talk about sort of being distractible or not being able to maintain attention. The question for me is, what is your brain trying to keep you safe from?
Mm,
Because when I've had to do say work with corporates, so I have to write quotes, and I have to sit down and write a quote, and I want to do this because I want to pay my bills
mm,
and I want to change the world. Sitting me down in front of a quote, my brain is like, I need to pair all my socks. I need to order all my books again. I need to check. And it's just like, okay, whoa, whoa, whoa. What are you trying to save me from? What are you trying to keep me safe from? And sometimes that is fear of being rejected. Because if I put this quote in, the company's got a choice on saying
mm,
yes or no. And actually, if I distract myself, my brain's distracted and we don't write the quote, we avoid the rejection.
yeah.
But actually sitting there and saying, okay, so what's going on here? Okay, so I'm being distracted from writing this quote because I want to do this. I need to do it because we like living in a house and having food. You're trying to keep us safe from rejection. Okay. How can I reassure myself that it is safe for this company to say no to me? What
Mm,
reassurance, what things do I need for that to be okay? And sometimes it will be after I press the send email, I need to go and watch. I'm a fan of the Golden Girls. I need to go and watch some Golden Girls because then that
mm,
puts me in a happy place. Sometimes it's just I need to remind myself that I've got 7 other quotes going out for companies and one of them will land.
yeah.
Does that make sense? So it's that listening to yourself
Amazing.
and working with what your brain tells you, because your brain wants to keep you safe. You want to be safe, you want to feel loved. That's it.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you. And what a great kind of thing to share, a great story, because media, social media especially, oh, I've got ADHD, oh, I procrastinate, that the end. No, no. And what you've just demonstrated there is there's a reason, there'll be different reasons, it will fluctuate, it will be different. And that's the point. We're still humans and have brains, so what do we need?
Yeah. And actually, there are some really basic habits that you can start for yourself. And again, I talk about it as being pulling the end of the ball of string. So you've got
Mm,
a massive ball of wool and it can feel overwhelming and sort of all the things you find difficult with ADHD and dyspraxia. It can feel so much. What's the end of your ball of string? What is the one habit or behavior you can put into your day that is going to make pulling that string just unravel? For me, I make my bed religiously, whether I'm in a hotel room or I'm at home or I'm anywhere else. I make my bed
yeah.
every day. And for me, that does a number of things. Number one, it tells me now it's time to wake up. So my brain is like, oh, we're up now, we're awake. So it gives a message. It's a clear, today the day is starting, sleep is finished. And as somebody who is chronically insomniac, that messaging at the beginning of the day is the thing that sets me up for a good night's sleep later that day.
Right.
I don't start my sleep pattern at night, it starts on the morning. Every time I get up, make the bed, my
Yeah.
brain now knows it's time to do things.
Yeah.
It's a gift to my future self because future Sara is going to like to getting into a nice snuggly bed. It's a
Yeah.
nice well kept for bed because I've loved myself enough to clean and tidy my bedroom. it also gives the message that it's safe for me to have nice, tidy things. It also tells my brain that okay, so today is going to be a good day because we've achieved something.
Yeah.
And quite often when I listen to people, neurodivergent people, and say, "Oh, I haven't done anything today." If the only thing you did that day was pull your sheets over and put your pillow straight, you have achieved something. You made your bed. You are
Yeah.
already winning.
Yeah. It.
So there are all these tiny little habits that you can put into your life that sets the day up to be better and different.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And it is. I think people think it has to be a big, giant habit that you're going to get just like that, which is so unrealistic. But the smaller habits, and even make them as small as possible, and then you're setting yourself up.
And this also comes down to when people feel overwhelmed. It's like so we're in a book launch at the moment,
Ooh.
just going to launch a book, and my brain went, all of the things I need to do. I need to do this and 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 this. And then all of a sudden my brain went from being really excited to being completely overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I don't know where to start. And the question for myself is, okay, so what's the first step? And I was like, well, this, but then this, but then this, but then this, but then this. And it's like, okay, so that's not the first step. So what's the step before that? And just keep asking myself, what's the first next step until I get to the point where my brain will not give me any yes buts.
Yeah.
And sometimes that is sitting up. You're in bed, sit up. That's your first step. Now,
Yeah.
what's the next step? I put my feet on the floor. Okay, what's the next step? I walk to my office. What's the next step? I turn my computer on. What's the next first step? So it's sort of almost sort of walking yourself backwards from overwhelm of all the potentials. What's the first next step?
Yeah. Yeah.
And because if you keep taking the first next step, you will get there. It's the 1% rule. If you keep doing one step, you will get there. You will
Yeah.
get nowhere if you're thinking about all the thousands of potential options and all the things you've got to do before you take the first step.
Yeah. Brilliant. That is just so amazing. Like amazing. Yeah, it is amazing because our brains don't naturally go there, do they? So it's about training your brain. And if you can ask yourself that question, what's the next step? What's the first next step? Brilliant. God, so many tips. So what are some of the there's throughout our conversation, it's really clear that you've got some amazing strategies, you know what you're doing, but what would you say you're really good at? And this can be related to neurodivergence or not, because of course we're all part of a whole. So what are some of your strengths?
So I'm really good at problem solving.
Hmm.
I'm really exceptionally good at problem solving. So when I was working in businesses, and I would go into sort of like a board meeting, we've got this intractable problem, we've got this thing we can't solve, or no, and my brain went, okay, I've solved that. Can we move on to the next thing? And it's like, and in my brain, because it goes into 70 different directions, it goes, okay, so this is the sequence of events. And by the time they finish the sentence, I've done the project plan, the critical path, I've done the risk assessment, I've done the marketing and the messaging, it's all done.
Wow.
Challenge for that is that when you're sitting in a room full of neurotypical people, you kind of have to wait for them to catch up.
Yeah. Can be excruciating.
Absolutely. The other thing I'm particularly good at is I'm really, and it comes with the neurodivergent thing, because with neurodivergent people, we are often really good at reading people, and we can become chameleons
Yeah.
because it comes back to the request to modify. So I've been told throughout the whole of my life in very tiny ways that I'm not quite okay. So I'm really good at, you can drop me into whether it's a crack den in the middle of London, or you can drop me into a 5-star hotel. Within a few seconds, I've clocked how you behave, and I know the rules.
Hmm.
And I can behave and play the part. And that's a sort of a, a sort of learned behavior thing. But it also comes in from my professional career. So as I said, I started my working life off in hairdressers, and you learn to talk to everybody.
Yeah.
I've been, and from that I went to I did youth work, and then I was a probation officer for many years. So you kind of learn how to work with people and solve their problems for them, whether it's I have straight hair and I want it curly, or I'm currently on probation and I have a problem with my finances, which is resulting in offending behavior. So I've got that ability to listen to people, pay attention completely to them, and then support them with this problem solving, to hold experiments with them to like, okay, so what is the solution to your problem? And this comes with the comes really brilliant with my coaching stuff, because it's not my solution. It's never my solution. I have a bunch of experience behind me of things that have worked for other people, but actually let's play with you. What
Yeah.
excites you? What works for you? Because if somebody's getting to work on time, their solution is to put coffee in the coffee maker the night before. Other people, it's going to be having timed sequences. Other people, it's going to be something completely different. But
Yeah.
it's the thing that I'm good at is sort of listening, paying attention, and helping them curate an experiment that they can go and play with.
Yeah. And I love the idea of it being an experiment, because so many neurodivergent people can be quite all or nothing thinking. So tried that, didn't work.
Yeah.
Call it an experiment. That's the pressure's off. It's like, oh, okay, let's play.
And also, if something doesn't have the desired effect, we have feedback. So
Yes.
we now know putting the coffee ready in the morning is not the route to getting you to work on time. We now know that that's feedback. And we
Yeah.
can use that feedback to curate our next experiment and go and play again. Because again, life, people think life's so serious, and particularly when you sort of like when I'm working corporates or when people are running their own business, it all gets very serious.
Yeah.
And actually, when you lighten up and you play, your brain relaxes and finds better solutions.
Yeah.
Which again, which is why I do design thinking rather than the sort of the standard EDI, equality, diversity, inclusion training and consultancy, which is let me go into a room and tell you why you are a terrible human being and discriminatory.
Yeah. And they'll
That
be
does.
sitting there like that.
I've
Don't
been
you
on those
tell
training
me.
days. I've been on those training days coming out going, oh my God, I'm a horrible human being.
That's awful. I'm laughing, but it's just,
It's just so when I go into companies, it's about, okay, this is some information. Let's explore what that means for you. Let's talk about, because all businesses are, it doesn't matter whether you're a solopreneur or whether you're a global business, all you business is getting goods and people attracted to you in the front door in your business and doing some form of transformation and out the back end. That's all a business is. And what inclusion is looking at that process regarding, and it will be different because if you work in HR, your job is to get people for the right jobs in the front door into those and to help them out. If you're in manufacturing, it might be getting raw materials in, transforming them, getting it. All inclusion is removing the frictions and the barriers to getting the best goods, services, and people in the front door to transform them to the highest quality value and getting them out. And when you shift the conversation from you need to know everything there is about, I'm doing a lot of work at the moment about decolonizing my practice. It's blowing my mind. I
wow.
don't need to know everything. What I need is the thinking skill to ask the question, what is the barrier that I'm inadvertently creating to get the right people, goods, and services into my business? What are the barriers that are created by how I run my business that are stopping the best quality and best value being added to what I do to get it out the back door? And it shifts the conversation from being you're a bad, horrible human to how do we make this business work better for more people?
Lovely. Love it. Brilliant. Okay. So you mentioned a book. Tell me about the book.
Oh, this is our second book. This is up, so back in 2020 July, or roll back. I started into this consultant. I've had other businesses, but I started this particular business as a result of pandemic. So it at the time it was rotten
Mm.
as sticks, but it was actually a real gift. And in June of 2020, I was introduced to a wonderful human called G. Sabini Roberts, who at the time was starting a podcast called The Entrepreneuro Show. And it was for neurodivergent entrepreneurs, and it was going to be a podcast. Brilliant podcast, didn't get past the first season. However, they wanted somebody to run a community that sat alongside the podcast. At the time, I was not doing very much. I was starting my business, and they said, "Would you like to run the community?" I was like, okay. I've never done it before. Why not? Again, this is one of those things about neurodivergent people. We are people that have a risk tolerance because we've mucked it up so many times. What's the worst that's going to happen? Let's give it a go. Let's have fun. And the first year in there, we wrote an anthology of neurodivergent business owners' stories. So it's quite a small book, but there are stories of people who are neurodivergent and running businesses really successfully. So that was our first book, and that was the How to Entrepreneurs community book.
Yeah.
Fast forward to middle of last year, it was like we actually know some things now because we've been running the community, and it's a really active community. We have a bunch of things that happen every week. How about we decant what we know into a book? Because when you go to, I did my MBA, I teach Oxford Brookes on the business and management, and what they teach is neurotypical ways of doing things. If you want to run a business, start with a business plan. Let's unpick that from a neurodivergent perspective. If I'm dyslexic, dysgraphic, or dyscalculic, the concept of writing a multi-page document is going to get my brain going, no. If I'm an ADHD person, you're asking me to keep a linear train of thought long enough to write this multi-page document. If you're an autistic person, you might have the type of brain who's going to have it's so perfect and all of the options and permeations that it's just going to be the business planning doesn't work for most neurodivergent entrepreneurs. There are other ways of doing it. And what the book is talking through that you don't have to run your business in the way that you've been told. You get to design and curate your business in a way that works for you. The good thing is that if you design a business that works for you, 9 times out of 10, it's going to also work for the people that you're trying to attract because you're creating a frictionless business. So the book is walking through all of the. We've got a chapter on traps and tacks because neurodivergent people quite often fall into traps when setting up their businesses. Hands up all of those people who have bought 150 different courses, all promising them the earth, and they've sat in the inbox and never been looked at. It's a trap because we want to know the things, we want to do this well, and we get suckered in to buying the things. And most of the courses have really good content if you did something with them.
Yeah.
But the neurodivergent brain will go, well, that didn't work, so it comes back to that. That didn't work, so I'm going to buy that, and I'm going to buy that, and I'm going to buy that, and you end up feeling really demoralized. The traps and tax also talk about the neurodivergent taxes, the things like the forgotten subscriptions that cost you and your business money. Fines. We're recording in February, so in the UK, we've just had our tax return deadline. The number of neurodivergent people who don't file their taxes on time and then get fined. It's a tax on running a business because of your neurodivergence. So what the book is it's pulling all this stuff apart and putting it back together, saying there is another way. There is a way of running your business that works for you and your neurodivergence. It doesn't mean you're doing more work. It doesn't lead you to burnout. There is another way.
Amazing. When is it out? I want to get my hands on it.
We're having a soft launch on the 1st of February. Oh, that's a lie. I told you a lie. We're on the 14th. Happy Valentine's Day for everybody. It's on the 1st of March is a soft launch. The 20th of March, in the middle of Neurodiversity Celebration Week, is the big launch. The website will be up hopefully by the end of today, which is neurodivergententrpreneurship.com.co.uk.org, and we bought all of the things. Again, it's one of those neurodivergent things. How do you know you're neurodivergent without telling me you're neurodivergent? I collect web domains.
Oh, good. That sounds like an awesome book. Really helpful as well. And the the fact that you can do it your own way, which can take a while for people to realize because of all the conditioning around you've got to do it this way. So
And
yeah,
absolutely, and the whole point of running a business is that, because many neurodivergent people have tried to fit into businesses and tried to have proper jobs, and it doesn't work for them because the way the businesses are designed create hostility in and of themselves. Even if you think about Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, if you're an ADHD human, your energy and attention might not work in that linear way in that way. So actually, that's a barrier. So the purpose of the book is to help people to recognize that there is another way of doing it. Okay, my brain's gone in 7 directions. Number one, because when we come out of businesses and go, right, I'm not doing that again, I'm not going to have another job ever again, we then go and design a business to the model that's just burnt us out.
yeah,
Makes no sense. But we didn't know that there was another option. So it's that. And it's also talking about how trying to encourage and walk people in a neurodivergent way towards getting a successful business. And that means changing the world and means earning you money. I'm a massive, great big hippie, and I recognize that money gives you choices.
yeah, lovely, brilliant. And but we're nearing the end. So before we talk about how people can contact you, what's your top tip for anyone that's suddenly realized or realizing that they're neurodivergent, whether diagnosed or self-diagnosed?
So, and absolutely, that point, that's really good. Self-identification is valid.
Mm,
It absolutely is. So whether you are clinically neurodivergent or you are self-identifying, as long as this is giving you language to help you to recognize patterns in your behavior and find ways of making your life easier, valid. If you're newly aware about your neurodivergence, I would encourage you to take your time.
mm,
What you're doing is you are unpicking a lifetime of conditioning, messaging, understanding of yourself. What am I, 45 years old, and I got my diagnosis at 36. So what am I, 14 years in? I am still uncovering bits about myself that I was like, oh, that's hard. Didn't realize that. I need
yeah,
to find a new way of doing that. So when you start your neurodivergent awareness journey or your diagnosis journey, people want to get to the end.
mm,
Take your time. It will take time. Hold experiments, work with yourself, and just take your time over it. I
yeah,
think, can I have another thing?
of course, go for it.
One of the things, and it's I'm a queer individual, and I'm making a sort of a kinship to, not kinship, I relate it in the same ways. When I first came out as being gay,
Mm,
um, I was excited about it, and I was like, oh, amazing, everybody. And some of the people around me were like, that's okay. I'm going to need some time to get my head around this.
yeah,
And it's the same as when you're going through your neurodivergent awareness journey, is because people will know you as a neurotypical human or assume neurotypicalness. And as you go through your journey, start to uncover bits about yourself that you find hard and finding different ways of doing things. The people around you that love and care for you, this is new information to them. You may have been thinking about this for 6, 9, 12 months. So you've done some of the thinking journey, but for the people around you, it's new information. So my second tip, and thank you, Suze, for giving me two. My second tip is to be mindful that you need to take those people that love and care and support you with you on the journey. They will be a different place in the journey to you. And that might look like confusion. That might look like crossness because, but I knew you as this type of person and now you're not that. And I want that old person back.
yeah.
So take it with you and be really gentle and mindful that people do love you and do care for you. And they just need a little bit more time to come with you to where you are.
That's such a good piece of advice and tip because so many people are excited or it's answered all their whole lifetime of questions, and then people are like, well, you don't look like you've got ADHD, and they come out with these silly they are silly things. They don't know they're silly. Surely they don't, otherwise they wouldn't say it. But really unhelpful comments like, you don't look like you've got ADHD, or you don't look autistic. And that can be so hurtful, can't it, for people? And they're like crushed. And I would, I was there myself. But so your advice of, being a bit more aware of where they are on this journey, and they're not anywhere near you.
As well as where you, because and there's things you don't look ADHD, that often comes from a place of confusion. Hang on a second, I've known my sister my whole life, and you're now telling me you're a different type of human being. And that's going to have emotions in me. So as much as it's unhelpful to the person, actually, and this is the difficulty with some of this, is because as a neurodivergent person going on your awareness journey, you're almost having to hold space for other people's change process while you're doing your own journey. It's hard work. So take your time, take people along with you for the ride.
Lovely. Thank you. Brilliant. Thanks so much, Sara. How can people get in touch with you if they want to talk to you about training or coaching or anything?
I'm Sara Kedge all over the place. So that's SaraKedge. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook. I've got the Neurodiversity Business podcast. I have a website. Sara, that's where you can find me. Sara Kedge, you'll find me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for coming along and sharing so openly. It's been great.
You're really welcome. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.